الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام الأتمان الأكملان على خير خلق الله أجمعين وعلى آله وصحبه ومن اهتدى بهديه واستنى بسنته إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Alhamdulillah, Allah has given us another opportunity to be here once again, to benefit from one another, inshallah ta'ala. Today's topic is on marriage in Islam. And so I'm just going to talk for a few minutes, not too long, inshallah, on this topic. And then the main point of this lecture or this discussion today is to answer your questions related to the topic, inshallah. And so when we talk about marriage in Islam, we're talking about one of the most important aspects of a person being a Muslim. And so for those of you who maybe most of you who come from a non-Islamic background, or you grew up not having practiced Islam, you may not have looked at marriage as being something so important, whereas Islam puts a lot of importance to it, to the point where many non-practicing Muslims would not dare get into a relationship unless it was a marriage relationship. Just to show you how important it is and how dangerous it is to be in any relationship without being married in that relationship. I'll just mention a few things about the benefits of marriage in Islam based on what Allah has told us, based upon what the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam has told us. So first and foremost, it is the sunnah, the way of all the prophets, in fact, all the prophets and messengers, and especially our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It is also in line with the fitrah. So the fitrah is the natural disposition of us human beings. And so this is the way Allah created us, to want to be in a relationship with the opposite gender. And so Allah has made an opportunity for that, not preventing us from that, but making it through marriage. Also, being married, it helps with lowering the gaze and preserving your chastity and protecting your private parts. And so our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "O young men, whoever among you is able to, get married, and whoever is not able to, then let them fast." And then he explained why. He said, because fasting, it helps in lowering the gaze and protecting the private parts. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran also commanded the believing men and the believing women to lower their gaze, and Allah told us the reason for that, because it is pure for you and it helps you to protect your private parts. And whoever is not able to, then let him fast. Now, some of you may be wondering, well, I couldn't get married and I followed this advice of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but I still can't handle myself. It's no different for me whether I'm fasting or not. The answer to that is that your fasting is not being done in the proper way. And so what fasting does, and it's suitable for us to be talking about this as Ramadan approaches, and we're all going to be fasting inshallah. What fasting is supposed to do is it is supposed to lower your energy to the point where you don't have that urge any longer. And so eating a lot, it raises your shahwa, your lustful desires. And when you stop eating, you prevent yourself from eating, then it cuts off that lustful desire. The problem is that when it comes time to break your fast in the end of the day, what we do is we end up eating and eating and eating. We eat so much that it's enough for 3 days, right? At the time of suhoor in the morning, when it comes time to have your meal before fasting, the same thing. We eat so much, and then we complain that it's not working for me. And then we start doubting, could the Prophet ﷺ have really said that, right? So the point is that fasting does help, but let us follow the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ in how he would fast and how he would eat. How he would break his fast. What would he break his fast with? And so on and so forth. Also, the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that getting married is a means of having children, and he encouraged us to have many children. He is reported to have said, get married to women who are loving and who can also give birth to children. And so, that increases the numbers of our ummah. Also, among the benefits of getting married is that it gives you stability. And by that, I mean in every sense. So it gives you, it basically causes you to be settled down. Now you're married, now you're going to start planning a family. It grants you that stability. Whereas when you're single, you're unstable. And so, you know, you don't know what you're going to do in life. You don't know where you're going to go, what you're going to do. You're all over the place. But when you get married, you kind of settle down. And so you have stability mentally, socially, and so you're able to focus in life. Getting married also completes your iman, as the Prophet ﷺ told us that when you get married, half of your iman is complete. And what that means is basically when you get married to a righteous spouse, when you get married to a righteous practicing Muslim or Muslima, she will be your aid and your support in your journey to Allah. And so, being in righteous company in general is very, very important. And so imagine if you were with one person uh, day in, day out, and that one person is righteous, God-fearing, practicing, committed to this deen, and committed to their relationship with Allah, without a doubt, that will increase you in Iman. So these are only some of the benefits. Now, in terms of how to get married, or how, many of us, I'm sure, are wondering, okay, I want to get married, and sometimes we, without thinking about it, we just rush, the first person I find, I'm going to get married to them. No, that's not how it works. That's not how it should be. Remember that this is going to be your partner for the rest of your life. And so you want to choose someone who is suitable for you. And so, how do you find that person? Well, you have to look at yourself and ask yourself, what kind of personality do you have? What kind of person are you? And then search for someone who is like that, compatible with you. And so sometimes, for the guys, it's all about looks. Unfortunately, that's the way we look. And so we become blinded by that. And we don't care about anything else. We become blinded by the looks. And so if you find a very, very beautiful woman, we're like, okay, she's Muslim. I don't care if she's not religiously committed. I'll bring her to that level of religious commitment that I want. That's a huge mistake. That's not the way we should go about doing it. The reason for that is the Prophet ﷺ, his advice was contrary to that. He ﷺ said that women are married for their beauty, and married for their status, their social status, and married for their wealth, and married for their deen, for their religious commitment, for their deen, their religion. Then he said, so search for the woman who has deen, is religiously committed. That should be your priority. That should be your priority number one. That's what you should be going out and looking for. And this is, I'm not saying only the brothers, but also the sisters, the same thing. Sometimes we look for men who are stable, financially stable, and we don't care about their religious commitment, right? It's not supposed to be like that. Priority number one has to be their religious commitment. Everything else is secondary. Everything else is secondary to that. I'm not saying that find someone who is who doesn't have a job. He doesn't bother working, and he's religiously committed. No, I'm not saying that either. Nor am I saying for the brothers only look for a religiously committed sister, even if she be very ugly to you. No, that's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is to make your priority the deen, and then look into the other things afterwards. So, for example, if you find a sister who is, if you have the option between, let's say, two sisters, and let's say both are acceptable to you in terms of their beauty, but one is more beautiful than the other. But that one who's more beautiful, her religious commitment is less. Right? The other one, her religious commitment is more. her beauty is acceptable to you. It's not that she's very ugly, right? So you should go with that one. That's what I'm trying to say here. You should go with that one. And likewise for the sisters, you find a brother who is religiously committed and he may not have a job, but he's looking and he's trying his best. Or, for example, he has a job, but it's not paying that much. Whereas another brother, he has, a very well-off job and he's very stable, but his religious commitment is less, for example. Right? Anyways, I don't want to prolong here. The point I think has gotten across. And now I guess, if anyone has any questions, inshallah, we could open up the floor for that.
Jazakallah khair, Shaykh. So I think naturally we always see, everyone's eager to learn about marriage, everyone's wanting to get married, so that's why these events are usually the largest. So yeah, Jazakallah khair, Shaykh, for, giving us those insight, how we should be looking to get married. So yeah, so Shaykh, I wanted to maybe just quickly ask, when we are looking to get married, especially nowadays in our society, it feels like, the preferred age to get married is being pushed further and further up because of the placement of the education system. So, nowadays there's many obstacles for us to get married. It could be, education, it could be work, it could be, having to buy a house. It feels like it's very difficult. What advice can you give to us to kind of overcome these different obstacles?
You mean your question is regarding society or us individuals?
Yeah, so, many of us and myself actually as well, like, it feels like the first obstacle is, education. Then it's like, work. And then after that, it's like you have to buy a house. It feels like there's so many things that we need to do first before we can get married. And it feels like marriage is such a long way away compared to, how it used to be, amongst the Prophet ﷺ's time, where they used to be able to get married much more easier than us.
Basically, it's unfortunate that that's how it is. And so what we need to do is, everyone has their own circumstances. And so some they really need to get married sooner than others. And that's why the scholars of Islam have mentioned that marriage comes under all five categories of the rulings of Islam. So, you know how in Islam we have the different rulings. So we have obligatory, and then we have recommended, and then we have permissible, and then we have disliked, and then we have impermissible. So these are the five categories that all rulings come under. So the scholars say that marriage comes under all five. And so it's based on the circumstances of each individual. So for some, it's obligatory. For others, it's simply permissible. And so for those who, unless they get married, they're going to end up committing zina. They have to put everything else aside. They have to put everything else aside and make marriage their priority and go out and get married. Go against the taboo, go against the societal norms, etc. No matter how young you are. If that is what is going to prevent you from, then you have to get married. For others, it may not be that severe. And so for them, we say, have patience until a time comes when you're able to get married. And so I think that's, it's a case by case situation. Wallahu a'lam.
Jazakallah khair. So we have a question where a brother he asks, what is the best way for a young man to find a girl? And he's specifically saying, when we do find a girl that is our age, how do we approach her father? Because we want to get married at this age and it's not a norm in society. How do we approach the father when, when we're being at this kind of young age, which isn't a norm in society?
In that case, one should try to look for someone who the father would be understanding of that situation. If you find a sister whose father is very cultural and he follows this idea that, my daughter is only going to get married at a certain age and she's only going to marry someone who is a university graduate, etc. And he's very, very strict on that. And perhaps, it's best to look elsewhere. That would be my advice. To find someone whose wali would be understanding of the situation. And for the most part, parents who live in this part of the world, they are understanding of that. Those who have been here for a long enough time and their kids have grown up in this society, they understand, the need for marriage for their children. For the most part. Yes, there are going to be those who don't understand that. I think for the most part, the parents are understanding of that, even though they want to hold on to their cultural norms.
Jazakallah khair. And then we have the next question, which is when we do look for someone to get married to, what kind of qualities can we look for? Or how can we suss out these kind of qualities? Because, many times people might be kind of just showing, on the face of it that they are, pious, but really, they may not be. So I think a lot of people, they have this fear of, how this person actually going to be after we do get married. So how can we find this out?
That's by investigating, searching, asking family members of that person you're interested in, people who are close to that person, investigating, digging up information, and not just going with what is apparent. That's your job, and that's something you have to do. And that's why the scholars say that it is not backbiting if you are approached and asked about someone who someone is interested in marrying them, and you're asked about that person. And if you say something negative about that person, it's not considered backbiting. So you have to do your due diligence, just like if you were to go out and buy something very very expensive, a very expensive product. You're not just gonna go like that, and people said that this is something you have to get, so you go and you buy it. You're not gonna do that. You're gonna look into that product. You're gonna do your research, especially when you have a lot of alternatives. You're gonna do your research. You're gonna compare. You're gonna see which one is better, etc. So obviously, you're gonna have to do the same thing here. Wallahu a'lam.
Jazakallah khair. And we have another question, which I think is actually quite important, especially perhaps for a lot of reverts and new Muslims. So it's about the wali. So if you are the only Muslim in your family, for example, who can be your wali? And maybe it might be good to also explain, the importance of a wali, and why is the role of the wali there in Islam?
The wali is basically the caretaker, the guardian of the woman, and the wali has been there from the day that the girl was born, and he took care of her, given her the upbringing that she needed, taking good care of her until she reaches that age of getting married. Imagine. Now we're talking about the way I explained it, that you have a father who took care of his daughter in the way that I explained. Imagine that someone comes and starts flirting with her and seduces her and has her heart now. They go off and he basically comes in and takes her away from the father. How would the father feel? Now, I'm saying this, contrary to how Western society is, where a father does not take care of their daughter in that way, where they give just some superficial upbringing. Then, for the most part, the girl is outside of home, uh, not really getting that parental attention and upbringing. So you wouldn't understand it unless you understood the way I explained it. So that shows you the role of the father now when it comes time for marriage. He's gonna decide, am I gonna give my daughter who I invested so much into her upbringing, into her everything, are you suitable for her? Or are you not? This goes back to him. He's gonna decide. And it's his right to decide. It's his very right to decide. In terms of, there are many other reasons and wisdoms that we can mention as well behind why Islam put that system in place where a woman cannot get married without the guardian's approval. Having said that, the condition for the wali guardian is that he has to be a Muslim. Has to be a Muslim. And if he happens to not be a Muslim, then he does not count as the wali. And in terms of the order that it goes, it starts with the father. If the father is not present or not alive, then it goes on to the other relatives of the woman, like grandfather, uncle, or brother. These are the eligible walis for the woman. So as for a convert who has reverted to Islam, then obviously she probably doesn't have anyone from her family who could be the wali. In this case, in a Muslim society and in a Muslim country, it is the governor leader of the Muslims who takes that role, and whoever he assigns that role to. So it could be his minister, it could be the justice system, so the judge. And that's how it is in Muslim countries. It is the Muslim judge who takes on that role of being the wali for the woman who has no valid wali. In our case, in the West, in Western countries, where there is no Muslim government, that role is given to the leader of the Muslim community. So that could be the imam of your masjid, or the head of the Islamic center or Islamic organization, whoever oversees and overlooks the affairs of the Muslims. He's the one who carries out that role for for those sisters. I hope that was answered.
Jazakallah khair. Sheikh, can you outline the marriage responsibilities of a husband and a wife to each other?
So obviously there are responsibilities that are upon both the husband and the wife, and this is something very, very important. This is something that is very, very important, and something that many of us we tend to overlook because especially when we're young, we just want to get married and we don't care about anything else. We don't look at anything else. We don't look long term. We look short term. We have something to fulfill, and the only way to fulfill it is through marriage, and that's it. We don't think long term, and this causes many problems down the road. And so we need to learn what are the rights and the responsibilities of each, of both the husband and the wife. And so, firstly, we can start with, let's say, the rights of the wife. The wife, she has the right to what is called maintenance. So, financial rights over her husband. So, her husband has to spend for her, has to provide her with accommodation. There even before the marriage, there is the dowry, the mahr, the gift that the husband has to give to her. This is her right. As for non-financial rights, then she deserves kind treatment from her husband. He cannot be abusive to her. He has to be kind to her. And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in more than one place in the Quran, وَعَاشِرُوهُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ, and live with them honorably. Live with the women honorably. Um, and the Prophet ﷺ, his own life was filled with examples of how he treated his own wives. Yes, so also among the rights that the wife enjoys, and so these are the responsibilities of the husband, basically. Among the responsibilities of the husband also is protection, giving his wife all kinds of protection, physical protection, mental protection, so that she is protected and not being in harm's way. And that includes protecting her from strangers, not allowing her to be around non-mahrams, and so on and so forth. Among the so that is with regards to the husband, his responsibilities for his wife. As for the opposite, the responsibilities of the wife to her husband, these include obedience to her husband. Obviously, when we say obedience, we don't mean in every single thing, but rather in that which Allah has made permissible. So if the husband commands his wife to do something haram, then she is not allowed to obey. In this case, she's not allowed to obey. But otherwise, in everything else, she needs to obey her husband, listen to him, because why? Because he is the leader of the household. He is the head of the house. It's not like how it is in Western norms where they are equal. They are equal, and no one has authority over the other. No, in Islam, Allah has given authority to the man over the woman in a marriage, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, الرجال قوامون على النساء. Allah made men the protectors. Men are the protectors and maintainers of women, so they have the upper hand. And then Allah also told us the reason for that. بما فضل الله بعضهم على بعض وبما أنفقوا من أموالهم. Two reasons Allah mentions. because Allah has made one of them to excel over the other, and that is the man excels over the woman in terms of being the breadwinner, and that's what Allah says, bima anfaqu min amwalihim, because of what they spend of their wealth. Also, among the responsibilities of the woman to her husband is to make herself available to her husband, and so she is not allowed to refuse her husband's request, you know, for intimacy without any reason, without any valid reason. Also, among the responsibilities of the wife is to to not allow anything to happen in the house that he does not like, especially when he is away. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions this regarding righteous women, that they are those who protect themselves, their own chastity, and they protect whatever is in their care when the husband is not there. حافظات للغيب بما حفظ الله. Yeah, and so see, these are some of the rights and responsibilities of each. So I hope that was answered there, inshallah.
Yes, Jazakallah khair for the detailed breakdown. So the next question is, um, how should we get in contact with the father? Like, what is the appropriate way to approach the father and the Islamic way and say, can I marry your daughter?
So this goes back to cultural norms. So, however, it is culturally acceptable, not to do it in a rude way, to do it in a way that's considered polite and acceptable in our Muslim society. So, if that means, for example, not approaching him directly, then you don't want to approach him directly if that is considered rude or impolite. So you may want to go through somebody. Yeah, so sometimes you can go directly to him and say, I'm interested in marrying your daughter. Or if you think that won't work, or it is not polite, then maybe you want to go through a friend of his, or somebody who knows him, etc.
Yeah, that makes sense. Jazakallah khair. So the next question is, what is an appropriate amount for the mahr?
The mahr can be monetary, and it can be non-monetary. So it could be monetary value, cash, money, or it doesn't really have to be, but it should be something of value. So in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, there was a man who wanted to get married, and he didn't have anything to give. He didn't even have like a piece of ring or anything value, sentimental value to give. So the Prophet ﷺ asked him, "Have you memorized the Quran?" He said, "Yes, I've memorized some of the Quran." He said, "Then make that your dowry." So basically, whatever you learnt of the Quran, make it the dowry that you are going to teach this to her. You're going to be teaching this to her. So this is something value to the people who value the Quran. It may not be of any value for the people of the dunya. Only think about money. Think that only money is something valuable. Without a doubt, the people of Iman know that the value of the Quran is far more superior than the value of money. But the point here, anyways, is that the dowry can be anything of value. But at the same time, we should not be cheap. And if we have a lot of money, we should not be like, okay, here is $1 or here's a few dollars as my dowry. It should be something suitable, something not. It shouldn't be something that you cannot afford, nor should it be something much less than what you are able to give. Allah knows best.
Jazakallah khair. The next question is there anything that isn't allowed to be included in the contract or the mahr?
Basically, when it comes to conditions of the marriage contract, you're allowed to stipulate any conditions as long as it is not something haram. So any condition that is added to the marriage contract is considered haram in Islam. It is considered null and void. It's not considered a valid condition. Same thing with the mahr. It has to be something that is not haram, not be something that is haram. So you can't be like, okay, here is my dowry, and it is a bottle of alcohol, for example. It cannot be something haram. Anything besides that is permissible. Anything that Allah has made permissible, that there are no limits to that. The only limit is once it starts going to haram.
Jazakallah khair. The next question is, what are the steps that a husband and wife should take in the event that they are constantly fighting or in conflict with one another?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. Need to resolve their disputes between themselves by reminding one another of taqwa of Allah, reminding one another to be fearful of Allah. And the reason for that is that these disputes happen when we lower our guard and we are no longer fearing Allah. That's why whenever Allah has spoken about marriage in the Quran, and whenever He has spoken about marital disputes, and whenever He has spoken about divorce, there's always, almost in every single verse, revolves around these topics. There's always a reminder of taqwa, having taqwa of Allah, fearing Allah. Why does Allah remind us of that? Because He knows us better than we know ourselves. And He knows that whenever we have these disputes, it is as a result of a lack of taqwa. It is as a result of a lack of taqwa. So one of the two are not fulfilling their responsibilities. So that what led to the dispute. One of them is not fulfilling their responsibilities, their rights to the other. And that causes the other to become irritated. That leads to the dispute. Sometimes it could go both ways. We don't want to put the blame on one. In fact, whenever there are such disputes, it's always because both are to blame. Almost always because both are to blame. Yes, maybe one started it, maybe one initiated it, but the other also, okay, I'm not going to fear Allah. Not saying it like that, but their actions showing that. Their actions showing that, you know what, if he's not, fearing Allah, then I'm not going to fear Allah. Their actions show that. So the point is that whenever we have these disputes, remind one another of Allah and how we will be held accountable before Allah. Then, if it still is not resolved, then this is where we should take our disputes to a third party. Try to have someone else involved, someone who could hear us and listen to us and resolve our disputes. And it's usually someone who has years of experience, someone who is elder, someone who is wiser. Not just, for example, getting my friend involved who has, zero experience in this, but rather going to someone who has experience in these issues and having them to intervene and helping to resolve the dispute. And above all, let us not forget to turn to Allah. Let's not forget to turn to Allah and make dua to Allah that, oh Allah, help us to resolve this problem. Help me to save my marriage. Resolve our problem, resolve our dispute. If one is mistreating the other, then pray to Allah that, oh Allah, guide him or her and rectify their affairs, etc. Not to forget that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in His hands belong our hearts. That no matter how much you may do to try to resolve something, you can never resolve it without Allah helping you. Never resolve it without Allah helping you. You could try day in, day out to try to make someone understand that they're wrong, but if Allah decides to not allow that to penetrate their heart, they will never understand it. That's where you turn to Allah. You ask Allah, oh Allah, make him understand, make her to understand that they are wrong. Oh Allah, guide their heart, open up their heart, rectify them. To forget that we should never depend on ourselves. We should never ever depend on ourselves. And Prophet ﷺ would always make that dua to Allah, that, oh Allah, don't leave me to myself for even the blink of an eye. Don't leave me to myself for even the blink of an eye. Allah knows best.
Jazakallah khair, Shaykh. And yeah, subhanAllah, there was that point about taqwa. It reminds me of a advice that I actually got, which I'll share, which is that when you are looking for a spouse, the easiest way to become sure of your decision is if you found someone that has fear of Allah, has taqwa of Allah, and that way you know that this person, they're going to do what they can, as much as they can, to fulfill their responsibilities towards you, and that way you have a truly, selfless, kind of compatible relationship. So I just thought I'd share that advice as well. So the next question is it permissible for a wife to write that she does not want her husband to have multiple wives in the marriage contract?
This is a common question. We are asked about whether she writes it or not. The husband has a right to get married to a second wife. So if she writes it in a contract and she thinks that this is a condition that he has to fulfill, she's wrong. Why? Because Allah has made it permissible, and you cannot make something haram that Allah has made halal. So effectively, you are making it haram for your husband to marry a second wife. That's what you're doing. By adding that condition in the contract, you are effectively making it haram for him. You don't know what will happen in the future. Maybe he'll be in need of marrying a second wife, and you're preventing him from doing that. Maybe he'll have a genuine need. And by that, I don't only mean like a sexual need, but also things may come up. And I know of these cases. I know of cases. There was a couple who, the woman became very ill and she could no longer give birth to children. I think she had cancer or something. The husband did not want to divorce her, but at the same time, he wanted a wife who could bear children for her. So he got married to a second wife. So imagine, may Allah give all of us health and never allow us to go through such a calamity. Imagine if you end up in that situation and you're not able to give children, to bear children for your husband. You prevented him from getting married to a second wife. So you're now forcing him, you are now forcing him to divorce you. He could go and find another wife who could bear children for him. This is just one example. I'm just giving a rare example. Inshallah, that does not happen with any of us. But I'm just saying that things can happen in the future that are unforeseeable. We may not see. So who are you to prevent something that Allah has made halal? So the point here is that when I said earlier, any condition that is halal and haram, this is included. So if you do put that in the contract and both sides agree, and later on in the future the husband decides to get married to a second wife, is not breaking the contract. It's not breaking the contract because that condition in the contract was invalid to begin with. Allah knows best.
Jazakallah khair, Shaykh. Shaykh, can you correct me if I'm wrong, but I also heard that, it is possible for a sister to at least write down that, if he does decide to marry a second wife, then she should let her know.
Yes, she could do that. She could do that. But what I had said is the very idea of not being allowed.
Mhm. And then the next question we have is, how do you know if you found the one?
There's no one way of determining that. Marriage is always kind of gamble because in the end of the day, after everything we spoke about tonight, like from the very beginning, about the importance of marriage, about the importance of looking for the right spouse and the one who is committed to the deen and the person of taqwa. In the end of the day, where does it reside? The Prophet ﷺ said it resides in the heart. Taqwa is here, and he pointed to his heart. You cannot open anyone's heart to check their level of taqwa or their level of iman. You have to go based on what is apparent. You have to go based on what is apparent. You investigate. You look for the right person. You ask others about that person and how devoted they are to Allah, how committed they are to the deen. Everyone, they're going to tell you based on what they see, that which is apparent. Even the closest of people to that person did not open that person's heart. Even them, they're going to tell you based on what is apparent. Yes, they may know certain things about that person that others don't know. Even then, they're going to tell you something that they know from that which is apparent. Also, things happen in the future, we end up in certain calamities, certain circumstances in life that we never expect. And how that person reacts to those situations sometimes will leave us dumbfounded. We'll be like, you know, this is the kind of person who I married who could not handle this test, who could not handle this circumstance that we're in. This is going to happen. This is going to happen. And this is something unavoidable because, you did not plan for that. You did not plan for your life to go in that direction. Allah planned it. Allah planned out your life for you. What situation you'll be in 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now. Only Allah knows. And so the point here is that my point of saying all this is we can never know 100% that this person is the right person for me. We just have to go with, that which is apparent to us and not to forget constantly turning to Allah. This is where istikhara comes in. Istikhara is make a dua to Allah that, oh Allah, if this is the right thing for me, then facilitate it for me. Make it easy for me to conclude this matter. Make it happen for me, basically. But if it is not good for me, then don't let it happen. Okay? So there are two very important pillars when you're looking for a spouse, a potential spouse. First is istishara, that is consulting people. The second is istikhara, that is to consult Allah. Ask around, ask people, and also ask Allah. People only know what is apparent. Allah knows what is apparent and what is hidden. Allah knows the past, the present, and the future. That is the very idea of istikhara. You're asking Allah based on His knowledge. Asking Allah, oh Allah, you are the knower, the all-knower. You are the knower of the seen and also the hidden. You know what will happen in the future. If this is good for me, let it happen. If it is not good for me and my future and my deen, then don't let it happen. And after that, you have to make a decision, eventually. Eventually, you have to make a decision. So once you've done that and your heart is settled that, yes, this is the right thing for me, then as Allah says, فَإِذَا عَزَمْتَ فَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ. So you are determined that this is what I'm going to do, this is the right decision. That's where tawakkul comes in. Tawakkal ala Allah. Put your trust in Allah, your reliance in Allah. Oh Allah, I'm going to go into this, I'm going to venture into this, and I'm satisfied. I think this is the right thing for me. So I put my trust in you, oh Allah, that you will make it happen. You will make things go smooth. Obviously, this is after a lot of due diligence, a lot of investigation, a lot of hard work. But that hard work will pay off in the end. And those who don't put that hard work into it initially, they are the ones who are going to suffer later on. You don't put in the due diligence into investigating and asking around and seeing different prospects, seeing what is suitable for me. When you don't do your due diligence, you don't put in the hard work and the effort, then obviously you shouldn't blame anyone but yourself later on. And that's the same thing with regards to the life of this dunya. Those who take it easy in this life, they don't put in the hard work to making it their destination, the akhirah, being Jannah. They don't put in that hard work, then they should not blame anyone but themselves when they find themselves with something else in the akhirah. Allah knows best.
Jazakallah khair, Shaykh. Thank you so much for, sacrificing your time and, delivering this talk and answering our questions. Especially in the coming up to Ramadan, we can inshallah, become that person of taqwa who we hope to find in our spouses, inshallah. May Allah bless you and your family, Shaykh. And, if you have any closing remarks or any final advice, then inshallah, yeah, feel free.
Jazakallah khair for organizing this, and I hope everyone benefited. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us beneficial knowledge that acts as a source for action, that we put into practice what we learn. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help each and every single one of us who are single get married to righteous, pious spouses that guide them and that are their partner in their journey to Allah, both in this life and in the next. صلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.